Hey guys, welcome back to Magic TV. My name's Craig. It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. It's my favorite time of the week because it's time for a Talk Magic. And today I'm interviewing someone that I've got to know a little bit more of recently in the last year or so. And I'm a huge fan of theirs. Now, this is somebody who has achieved great success as a performer, achieved great success as a business person in Magic. But over the last few years has built up a brand separate to himself as a performer and has created a show which is phenomenally successful and is becoming more and more successful by the second. And what he's achieved with that there is great. And I travel to see a lot of the shows. This is going to be a really, really, really amazing interview with somebody I have a lot of respect for. I can't wait to start talking to them. I am, of course, talking about from the Curious Cabaret, the one and only Chris Wilder. How you doing, Chris?
Hi, Craig. I'm really well, thank you. That was a very generous, a very generous introduction.
It's true. Well, Chris, I've known of you for a while, but not as part of the Curious Cabaret. I just knew that, as you know, a lot of, but we'd never really met, but I'd
Yeah.
known of you. I've got friends who are friends with yours and so on and so forth. But it was only about maybe not even a year ago. It was about 6 months ago that Matt said to me, I'm going up to the Curious Cabaret. Would you like to come? And I was like, what's a Curious Cabaret? And he said, well, it's this thing up in Nottingham. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll go and watch that. And it was brilliant. I was so impressed with everything about it. The way it was all organized, the look of the venue that I was in at the time. The lineup was incredible. I think the first time I went to see the Curious Cabaret, you had Andy Gladwin, you had Danny Buckler. I'm
Yeah.
like, this is an insane lineup. How have I not known about this? And every time I've gone back up, the lineup has been brilliant. And this is kind of a brand that you've built up, and it's
Mhm.
just it's almost like it's built up so much momentum now. It continues to grow and grow and grow. And I'm super interested to talk all about you, but
Mhm.
also about the Curious Cabaret, what your goals are with it, what made you set it up in the first place.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk through everything if that's okay with you,
Yeah,
Chris.
absolutely. Yeah, sure.
Amazing. Just for people that haven't really heard of the Curious Cabaret or haven't heard of you, we have a lot of viewers over in different countries.
Mhm.
Let's give them a frame of reference point to begin with, and let's talk about you. And I kind of call it your origin story. What got you into magic? How did that happen? When did you kind of get bitten by the magic bug?
So my story begins when I was about, I want to say 8 or 9 years old,
Hmm.
and I was invited to be an assistant to a magician.
Wow.
So he was retired, but he was looking to put on some last few shows for some big charity events, and was looking for a new team. So he needed female assistants, younger male assistants, and I was thought to be someone who looked quite keen and would be good at that. I was already interested in theatre as well, and so I got invited at the age of 9 to join this team and step behind the curtain and get to learn about stagecraft from behind the scenes. So learning about how you walk onto stage and how you carry props and learning all these kind of crazy scripts and getting to see these illusions from the other perspective. And that was my first dip into the world of magic. And for the most part, it started off just learning the technicality of it and learning the kind of stagecraft behind it rather than being a performer myself. But through that time, I got to meet other magicians. We went along to conventions and conferences and things like that, where I started to see close-up magic being performed. And that was my first experience, I think, of seeing magic right in front of your nose performed by professionals. And it was incredible. And remember just being completely captivated by this whole world. And then from there, I started to show an interest. And so this magician, his name was Fred Elliott, he encouraged that. He bought me a copy of Mark Wilson's Course in Magic, as I know many people have started their journey with that book. And I just started voraciously reading that and learning lots of the classics. I think I started out with things like linking rings and cups and balls and sponge balls and very basic card magic. And I did that for a long time, but it wasn't really until I was then a teenager. I think it was around about the time that David Blaine was becoming popular. Lance Burton was on the TV in the UK. And that's when I became interested in learning more sort of technical sleight of hand, I suppose, predominantly cards. And, I think I learned a lot of the kind of sleight of hand at the time by literally watching David Blaine again and again and again on repeat in slow motion,
Mm.
trying to figure out how he did those card routines. And that was where it all began.
Interesting. And that's kind of an interesting journey into magic because a lot of people that learn magic or get bitten by the magic bug, they start with close up.
Mm,
And then maybe they get an interest for stage down the line. But you're
mm,
coming in as a child, learning all about the stage
mm.
aspect of performing before getting an interest in close up magic.
Yeah,
Would
that's right.
would you say learning how to perform on stage, how to carry yourself on stage, how to perform magic on stage helped when it comes to performing close up magic? Or learning close up magic, or are they?
Yeah, they are two very different skill sets. And the things that you learn when you're on stage, some of those kind of bigger skills of how to present yourself, how to carry yourself on stage, it's really small details that you perhaps wouldn't even think about. Things like which foot do you place onto the stage as you leave the wings? So how you present yourself in terms of angles and blocking and things like that, how you present yourself to the audience. So those are the kind of skills you're learning on stage, and you're learning things about theatricality and musicality. So then when it came to learning close up, it's a very different experience. And I loved it because I loved people get to see it right in front of them. It's very intimate and there's nowhere to hide anything, but it's a much narrower focus.
Mm,
I think the transition from stage to close up is easier than the transition from being a close up performer to then going on stage,
mhm.
because there's lots of skills that are hard, I think, harder, I think, to inflate, I think, onto stage, but they certainly can be learned. And my interest, my background was always in theatre, was always in drama, was acting and being involved in productions and plays and musicals and things like that, even from an early age. And I guess it's no coincidence then, I think, that it comes full circle then to something like the Curious Cabaret. And so my heart is in both places. My heart is in that world of close-up magic where people can see it and it's really intimate. But also, I love the stage as well.
Well, here's a question. You talked about how you became interested in close up magic. Was the goal always to become a professional magician? Because a lot of people that I speak to on these interviews, they go, "Oh, yeah, I learned how to do magic, but I didn't realize I can make a living from it." But you're coming from a place where your first entry point into magic is, "Hey, I'm traveling around being a part of this big stage show." So you
Mm.
must know that it's obviously very, very possible to become a professional. So is that something that you wanted to do, or was it kind of more of a hobby type of thing?
It's another excellent question. I think it was very much a hobby. It was very much an all-encompassing hobby, but it was something that I just spent a lot of time on. Certainly as a teenager, I spent hours and hours practicing, rehearsing, and anyone who would give me the time, I would show them things, whether that was through school or family. And I think at the back of my head, doing things in theatre and performance was something that I always wanted to do. It's not actually the route that I did take in the end. I don't think I ever really considered it as being a full-time career.
Hmm.
I was never really very certain as to what I wanted to do growing up. I didn't really fit into a neat little box of what I wanted to do. Um, I sort of came from a family where academia was encouraged. And so I studied sciences and I studied maths and I went on to university where I studied engineering. And then eventually I ended up in a career in teaching. So I was actually a teacher for 10 years. And
Oh, wow.
I used to teach physics. And it was during that time as a teacher that I decided I wanted to have a go at doing something myself. I didn't come from a family who knew about business and being an entrepreneur, but wanted to have a go at being self-employed and being my own boss. I had young children at the time, and so teaching was a very busy career, and I
Hmm.
wanted to be able to spend more time with my children, and so decided to have a go at it. And eventually, I transitioned from part-time, and then eventually went full-time as a performer. and love it. I love being my own boss. I love being able to create and perform. And it's a lot more than just gigging magician, which is what I thought it was going to be when I started out.
Mhm.
And it's become a lot more than that. So I think at the back of my mind, I always wanted to be a performer and be on stage, but never quite thought that would be something that would happen. It was always there in the background, doing sort of things semi-professionally. But it's only now that it's my full-time job.
Okay. And I have a couple of questions about that. So the first question is, I get asked on this channel all of the time, probably maybe 10 or 12 times a week. I'm a hobbyist. I've done the odd gig or two. I want to become a full-time magician.
Mm,
As somebody who's successfully made that transition, is there any advice that you can give on kind of making that transition from having a secure income
mm.
to kind of basically going self-employed and being responsible for, your own money and income that comes in?
Yeah, so I would say perform as much as you can. So get the experience, put the time in, kind of get the stage time, get as good as you can, and get help from people around you. If there aren't opportunities, which is what I found when I first started out, then create them yourself. So there were certain things that I always wanted to do as a performer, and the work wasn't coming to me. So I thought, well, let's create them. This is kind of where the Curious Cabaret came from. I would say, the word of caution, just build up that work slowly, build up that community and that client base of people who enjoy and like what it is that you're producing. And so when you get to the point where you can earn an income from it, perhaps there's an opportunity in work to reduce your hours. And so you can supplement a main job with performing
Mhm.
and you can transition that way. I think there's wisdom in not jumping in with both feet unless you are in a very fortunate position where you have perhaps a partner who has a very well paid job. That's living the dream, right?
Wait.
Or perhaps you're in a financial position where you can do that. But I think, yeah, build up your experience, find opportunities to perform, even if that means doing things for free, working for free. When it comes to exposure, this is one of those topics that's always discussed. Sorry, not exposure. Sorry, like working for free, doing
Yes.
doing it for exposure is what I mean, not exposing secrets. It's always one of those topics that's fiercely debated in the magic community. And I think I always advise people to think about it in terms of value. So if you're going to perform for free, that's fine, but what are the things you can get from it? So can you get photographs? Can you get video? Can you get testimonials? Are you going to be able to work in new material? And there are all these things that you can get from those events, more than just, oh, people are going to see me and then fingers crossed, I'm going to get loads of work from it. But you can actually actively put steps in place to work towards that goal of performing full time, even if you're working for free technically.
That's great. That's really, really good advice. And how important, now I don't know you as well as I'd like to, but one thing that struck me in the 5 minutes of research I did before this interview is I get the impression that you spend a lot of time thinking about the business side of magic.
Mm,
And it's that old expression, isn't it? There's two, show business. There's two words, show and business. And most
mm,
magicians will focus on the show and they won't put any stock in the business. But you can build up the Curious Cabaret to where it's got to right now, or yourself as a brand,
mm,
without having a strong understanding of business, marketing, sales,
mm.
growth. Like, how important is that? And how did you go and educate yourself before you went full time? Like, did you think about going full time and go, right, okay, I need to learn how to do this, this, this? Or was it kind of like I don't know this. I better learn it quickly. Like,
Mm.
because obviously, as a teacher, you have a certain skill set. My wife was an ex-teacher, so
Yeah.
um, but it's a very different skill set to running a business, is what I'm
Mm.
trying to say.
I think I was quite naive when I started out in business. I was in a position where I had a little bit of breathing room when I left my career as a teacher. And so I set out thinking that I would be a gigging magician. That I thought, okay, I'll do strolling close-up gigs and I'll put some kind of show together and I'll do those kind of things. And I think when I started out, I also did work with schools as well. So I did workshops in schools and I did all sorts of different things. And then gradually, as I spent more time reflecting on it, and actually then we had a global pandemic in the middle of it as well, I kind of came to the conclusion that my strengths lie in event production and building projects and building different things in that respect. So there was a lot of things that I didn't know. So I didn't know anything about accounting and marketing and all these different skills that come into play when you're creating a business. And so I think to start with, it was a lot of trial and error and playing with ideas. There are certain skills that I do have, like kind of graphic design and things like that, which I can bend to my use. But actually, there's a lot of value in seeking out and finding people who have the skills that you don't. So working with other people, either learning from them or getting the help of other people, bringing them on board. And I think that's where you can really scale and grow in business when you can be doing the things that you're very good at and getting other people to help you with that. So now as kind of things are growing now, there's a whole team of people that are hiding behind me in the wings who have been massively influential in what I'm doing, as well as being, active helpers in growing the things that we're growing. So I'd say, yeah, I'd say get help from the people that you can find help with. There's a lot of value to be found in business networking, which I found where you can meet all sorts of people who have these skills. And if you work and you collaborate with other people, there's ways. It doesn't have to be a really expensive process. There's ways of working together and supporting one another so that you can grow side by side.
That's very, very good advice. Thanks for that, Chris. I want to ask you another question when it came to building your brand before we talk about the Curious Cabaret. I might be completely wrong. And if I am, I'm sorry. And I don't know the answer to this question. But looking at the shelves behind you, there is a hand holding a magic wand. That very much looks like a award for a competition in magic. Would that be what that is?
No, I think I can officially say I'm the only magician in the world who doesn't have award-winning magician on his website.
That's what I
Um,
was going to ask. I was going to say, like, I've spoken to people on various interviews, and some people say, "Oh, you have to do competitions. You have to do competitions. There's so many different reasons to do it." And then other people will say, "Don't do competitions. It's completely pointless. It doesn't mean anything to the general public." Um, do you have a viewpoint on that? I genuinely thought that was a
Yeah,
competition.
no, I'm a great advocate of competitions. I've never entered one. I've always wanted to. I think it's been in the back of my mind for a number of years. I've always thought it'd be good to enter something like the Magic Circle, close competition or stage competition. But to my own failure, I think I'm very bad at coming up with lots of ideas and projects, and I just take on too many things. And so then having time to actually do things to the standard I want to do them doesn't always work. But in terms of should you do competitions, if you want to get a good act, then yes, absolutely, you should do competitions. The things that you will learn from preparing are invaluable. There's a number of people that I've worked with. So I work with Mark Oberon in Nottingham. So Mark is a really good friend of mine. I've known Mark now for over 10 years, 10, 15 years, something like that. And, Mark's obviously entered lots of competitions. And I've been working recently with Doug Tilson, who has just come back from the European Championship. So Doug has been and performed at the Cabaret a number of times as he's been working on his
Okay.
FISM act.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, I very much want to help with those things and lend my skills and my eye to those and encourage people, yeah, to get involved. I don't think there's any reason not to do a competition, save for if you can't commit the time, for example. Um, I think worrying about what people will think, what people will say, I think it can be a really good driving force, a good motivator for putting the work in, putting the time in. One thing I would say about this, and I was incredibly inspired by listening to a lecture at Blackpool, not this year, but the year before. And the lecture was with Lauren Perron, who's the current FISM world champion of stage magic. And the lecture he did was not just him on his own, but it was with his director. And they did the interview as a pair. And what was really fascinating to me about this was what they did was they created a stage show. His director's not a magician, but they created this stage show, and the director encouraged Lauren to be as big as possible. And then they took the best 10 minutes of that stage show and they honed it and they refined it into a competition act.
Mm,
But when they talked about winning FISM, it was always talking about we won FISM. And there was always this collective. It wasn't an individual. And I think it was really inspiring because recognizing there's a lot of people who go into creating amazing acts.
mm,
And too often we as magicians are guilty of trying to do things by ourselves, whether that's in business, whether that's on the stage, what we're performing. There's so much to be gained from collaboration with one another and helping one another to be better performers.
mm. That's again amazing advice. It really is. And I will say, and I'm not just saying this, I absolutely mean it. Twice I've seen you perform your Sharpie routine,
Mm.
which uh, is the best routine I've seen with the Sharpie ever. Like it's just so well routined, and I think if you did that in any magic competition, you'd be a cert. It's just brilliant. It really is.
A few people have been kind of poking me to work on it and put it into competition at some point, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, it's incredible. So let's talk about the Curious Cabaret then, because we've spoken about it many
Mm.
times in the last half an hour, but we've never actually said what it is. What? So let's start with this. So what made when did the Curious Cabaret start?
Mhm.
When did you have the idea for it, and what made you decide to do it? Because a lot of pros that I've spoken to, they go, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna find my own venue and I'm gonna do a show," and it's massively hard work, and a lot of people don't actually get to the point where anything happens because
Mm.
they realize very quickly it's a lot of expense
Mm.
and it's a lot of hard work, even to make it even slightly moderately successful.
Mm.
But what you've done is you've not just made it successful, you've taken it to a whole other level. So what made you decide to go down that route? And when did what preparations did you go through to actually set it up? And when did the first sort of launch of the Curious Cabaret actually happen?
Yeah, so it was very much an organic process. I didn't wake up and think, right, I'm going to create this whole show and this is what it's going to look like. What actually happened was there was a group of magicians. So we have a community of magicians in Nottingham, and we decided to get together on a kind of fairly regular basis to help each other to perform. And one of the members of the group is a guy called Atlas Brookings, who, if you're in the mentalism community, you'll know who I'm talking about. Atlas decided he wanted to set up an open mic night for magicians. So much like your music open mic nights or your spoken word nights or comedy nights, it's going to be an open mic night where you could come and try out new magic and just invite friends along and work on stuff like that. And I think he did one of them and then was going to be away the next month. So we said, "Hey Chris, could you run next month's one?" And so I said, "Yeah, sure, okay." And so I did. And then he said, "Oh, why don't you just take it on? You're doing a good job of it." So I just took this thing on, and it was an open mic night. We started out with magic, and we had some comedians, and we had some spoken word as well. But it was a chance for magicians to have a stage, a platform where you could come and perform every month, and it was great. And it forced me to come up with new material, and it started to grow slowly. But for various reasons, the venue we had was like a little dingy cellar in a dingy pub in the city, and it didn't quite work for what we wanted to do. And so pre-pandemic, about 2019, so that was running for about a year, and this was whilst I was still a teacher. But in 2019, we decided, okay, well, I decided, I say we, it is me, but I decided, okay, we need a new venue. So there was a cocktail bar not far from where I lived that I really liked, and I thought, oh, this would work. So I went and approached them, and I said, look, I've got this idea for this event. We're already doing it here. What would you think about us trying it out? And they were keen. So we moved venues to where it is now, which is the Berliner and Beeston. And we started off with next to nothing. So we had, as Jez Rose described it, the designated linoleum performance area, bit of lino where somebody stood and performed from. And we had nothing. We just performed there. It was free for people to come to, but we ended up doing it as like a busk. So we had a hat pitch and people would throw in some money. And then the money that we raised through that, I then started to buy a few things. So I bought lighting. I had somebody make these curtains for me. And I just reinvested any money that we could make from it back into the show. And then we had a global pandemic, and that was a bit of a turn. Actually, just as a slight interlude, and this may come up a bit later on, in the time that oh no, it was actually 2 years. So we were 2 years, so we were at the Bliner before the pandemic. A year before the pandemic, the owner of the Bliner and I then decided we were going to form a business partnership. And we spent 12 months planning to open the UK's largest magic theatre and cocktail bar.
Wow.
And then the pandemic was announced 1 week before we signed that lease. And so that did not happen, obviously. Slightly dodged that bullet because it would have been real heartache, but that still is an idea that's very close to my heart and something that I'm working towards in the future. Anyway, more on that later. So we had a global pandemic, which was really hard for a lot of reasons. I think I didn't touch any magic for 9 months. But then eventually somebody persuaded me to have a go at doing virtual shows, discovered that I really enjoyed them. So we thought, okay, we'll try the Curious Cabaret as a virtual show and had loads of support. It was overwhelming how many people said, yeah, we'll buy tickets. I think our first show, we had 200 people come to watch it, which was crazy.
Wow.
And so then we did that for a while. And then after the pandemic, when businesses were reopening, hospitality businesses were opening, but still kind of struggling to get back on their feet, I came back to the Blur and said, look, we've been doing this show. It's been really popular. Could we have a night of the could we have a night of the week when you're not open, which was the Tuesday night, and I'll put on events and shows and we'll bring in customers. They said yes. And that's where the Curious Cabaret then found its identity as it is now. It was called the Curious Cabaret by this point. It then became a ticketed show. And again, money was being invested into it. So, and over time, we've bought lights, we've bought PA equipment, mics, we've now got staging, there's all sorts of stuff. But it's just a constant reinvestment back into the show to make it as good as possible.
Wow. So my next question is, you obviously are at numerous venues now,
Yes.
you're a cabaret. So when you first took it off Atlas, it was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. When did it get to the point where it's like, well, actually, because there's only so much time in the day, and you're obviously a professional performer as well. We've talked
Mm,
about the side of things. There's a lot
mm.
that happened there. Did Was at the Curious Cabaret, even when you were running it as a ticketed event, was it more of a kind of a fun thing to do? And at
Yeah.
what point did it become, and I'm assuming it has become, I'm taking the leap here and assuming,
Mm.
at what point did it become kind of more of a, well, this can almost be a separate brand to Chris.
Mm.
This can be a thing that I can do that's going to be almost a completely different income stream that's not just about me, it's about this other thing that I've got going, which is super intelligent, having multiple income streams. When did
Yeah.
that
So
shift?
it's always been a labor of love. So the vision behind the Curious Cabaret has always been to showcase, to promote, or to champion, I suppose, magic, to give the public the chance to see really good quality live magic, because the number of opportunities are few and far between. You can see magic maybe if you go to a wedding, perhaps, or if you make the effort to go to like a big live show like Darren's shows. But in the middle ground, there's very few opportunities. If you think, oh, I fancy going to see some magic tonight, there's not really that chance to do it. So that was one half of the vision, wanting to give people the chance to see really good quality live performance. And then the other side of it was wanting to support performers, wanting to give them stage time, wanting to help build and grow the work of other people and support the community in that way. And um, that was where it started out. And so all of the money that we were kind of taking from ticket sales, I was reinvesting. I wasn't really paying myself anything for the Curious Cabaret. And gradually over time, as it's grown, as you say, and the community of people who come back again and come for the first time has grown, we've been able to get acts in from further afield. So we now have acts from outside the UK that we fly in. And it's yeah, it is becoming slowly profitable. Sometimes it doesn't go so well, sometimes it goes well. But it's kind of at that tipping point at the moment where it, it could scale quite easily now with the community of people behind it. And so we've done some touring shows and we're looking at bigger venues as well. And creating a bit of a circuit. So you've alluded to the fact that we have two resident venues now every month, which are back to back. So one on the Tuesday, one on the Wednesday, both in Nottingham. But we're looking to expand into bigger spaces or look at neighbouring cities, so potentially Birmingham or Leicester, things like that, and create that circuit. So it's at that sort of tipping point at the moment, and it sits separately to my other sort of income streams in business.
What's your priority? So, for example, hypothetical here, you have somebody who wants to book you to do a week of shows. Chris Wilder, nothing to do with
Hmm.
the Cure. Right? And it'd be a great opportunity, very well paid,
Hmm.
good gig or good series of gigs.
Yeah.
In order to do that, it's going to mean that maybe an aspect of Curious Cabaret didn't go ahead that month, because
Mm.
you're obviously going to have put time in. What would you choose? Would you choose the Curious Cabaret or would you choose Chris Wilder? Like, is there a thing that you prefer doing over the other, or
Yeah, so I think if it was going to clash with shows and dates and things like that, there's a no-brainer that the cabaret would take priority. If it's a show, if it's an event on a different week, then there's capacity to be able to take that on and perform. But I think the more and more that I do what I do, as I said earlier, I've realized that I'm less of a gig magician myself as an individual, and my strengths lie more in bringing people together and bringing productions together. So that's working with other performers, other venues, and pulling the strings, I think, behind the scenes. So, yes, I can perform as well, but I think actually my strengths lie in the production side of things. So, lots of the things that I do in business are I'm slightly stepped away from. So they have brand identities, which I could be there and I could be running it and performing, but I could have other people delivering those things as well.
mm,
It depends whether the client wants me, if they want me specifically, then then I'll go and do that. But if they want a magician or they want one of our team because they know our reputation, then we might be able to do that instead.
that's great. That's fantastic. And what's the do you have you alluded to a cabaret venue. Um
Hmm.
what's your end game when it comes to the Curious Cabaret? Is it kind of I'm flying by the seat of my pants and I'm having fun and we're going to see where this goes, or do you have goals in place in terms of where you're wanting to see it go?
There's an element to which I am still figuring things out. I always see these things as like stepping stones. So, okay, we're here now. Where does this get me to next? So we've got this venue, we've got this many people. Okay, if I approach that venue and say, look how great this show is, then we can get a bigger venue. And so it's kind of a game of stepping stones. And I very much enjoy producing shows, and it'd be great to grow and expand this and to do more work with individuals. I'd love to do more in terms of producing and directing and helping other performers to whether they want to create individual acts themselves or to come and join us in our show. I'd love to do more of that. So it's possible that we can scale this as a more like a touring show or as a circuit. Certainly, if we were to add a third venue and then a fourth venue, it would very much be a fully sustainable brand on its own two legs. It would, it would run independent of me almost. So there is that, and I think that would be great. That would be an amazing thing to do. It's great because I get to meet and work with so many brilliant performers, as you've alluded to, who it's just a lot of fun, really. But then at the other side of things is the Curious Cabaret, in part, was began as a piece of a puzzle, which is to create a permanent home, a headquarters, if you like, for the performance of magic, which would serve several purposes. It would be a place where people could come on a Friday night, on a Saturday night, where they could see incredible shows, very much like the Chicago Magic Lounge or the Magic Castle. That I think ultimately is the end game. That is what I'd love to do, and have theatre space where we can be working on helping people write their own shows and then showcasing them to the public, where we can have great food, great hospitality, where we can help teach and train closer magicians, and just be I guess, a celebration of magic. That I think is where my heart ultimately lies, and where lots of the pieces of the puzzles of the different things I do in business are all working towards.
Hmm. And you said that that is something that you're working towards. Is this
Mm.
are you making active roads in towards having a venue like this? Because that would be amazing. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, so it's I'm kind of at the stage now where it requires investors. So I think when we started this idea, the whole idea was going to be four walls, and we were raising capital ourselves. And the vision for what I want to do has grown significantly since we first started on that journey. And I recognize that for something of that scale, that magnitude, we'll need investment. And so I guess at this point, I'm looking to gather together a team of like-minded individuals, to then start kind of forming a pitch deck and approaching investors for what this might become.
Mm,
So yeah, it's there in the background, and I'm trying to maintain the kind of other areas of business that I'm doing at the moment and get those to a point where they are self-sustaining.
mm.
And once they are, then hopefully in the next 12 to 18 months, then we'll be pushing forwards to that idea of a permanent home.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely amazing. I want to ask you two more questions
Mm.
about the Curious Cabaret. The first is, how did you when did you get to the point, or how did you get to the point where you started inviting acts to perform on the Curious Cabaret that are a very, like I said, the first time I walked in, I was like, oh, there's Andy Gladwin, there's Danny Buckler. Oh my
Yeah.
God. And I know, I was speaking to you've had Tom Stone in, you've had some amazing people that have traveled from all over the world to be in the
Mm.
Curious Cabaret. I
Yeah.
suppose two questions on that. The first question is, how did you get to that point where you make the phone call and you go, "Yeah, I run cabaret show. Is that Tom Stone? Yeah, I run cabaret shows in Nottingham. Would you like to come over and do a show?" Like that's a kind of an interesting conversation to have. But then,
Yeah.
secondly, from a business point of view,
Hmm.
how important is it to have those acts come in? Because look, you hear Tom Stone, you hear Danny Buckler, you hear Andy Gladwin. As a magician, you're like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, this is amazing. These are people I've looked up to.
Hmm.
These are some of the biggest names in magic.
Mm.
But a layperson,
Hmm.
or somebody who's not invested in magic, that's just buying a ticket to see a good show,
Yeah.
they won't know the difference between Mark Oberon, who lives 5 miles down the road, and I'm not disparaging Mark at all. He's one of my
Mm.
favorite performers of all time. I
Yeah.
use Mark not in the context of he's not an internationally successful magician. He is, but he's just down the road from where you run the venues.
Mm.
Versus somebody like Tom Stone, who is on a different country, and you have to have the expense of bringing him in and probably accommodation and so on and so forth. Like
Hmm.
from a business point of view,
Hmm.
how important is it to actually have acts like that come in? If a
Yeah.
lot of acts that are locally or even a few hours away that would probably be very good as well.
So I think there's two questions there. There's a how and there's a why.
Yeah.
And I think I'll answer the why first, I think.
Okay.
So you're right in that the public don't really know the difference between Tom Stone or Mark Oberon and, say, Uncle Jeff from, well, they probably know the difference between Uncle Jeff from down the road. But perhaps a local magician, they wouldn't know unless they perhaps seen them on BGT or something like that. That there's no sort of celebrity culture in magic for a lay audience. And so there was an argument to say, well, why do we advertise who's on the bill? But I very much want to educate the public in that. I was really inspired by Joshua Jay's book. Um, the name has escaped me now. How Magicians Think,
Yes.
which he wrote recently. And I bought that for several people for Christmas who aren't magicians. But just it's a fascinating, easy read that gives you a dip into the community, the world that we live in. But I think we have a bit of a responsibility of educating people and pushing ourselves to create the best magic that we can create. and I want to I want to be doing that myself. And I know that one of the ways I can do that is by working with people who are very good at what they do, people who've inspired me, and recognizing that I'm not the finished product, and wanting to keep working towards that. So the question of why getting those people in, I think even though people don't necessarily know those names, when they see them perform, they can tell the difference between
Mm.
someone who's very good at what they do and someone's okay. And that's not to say that there isn't a place for someone who's okay and someone who's developing and working. And we very much want to support those people as well, and help them. But I think there's a conversation there to be had about, okay, like how can we make this as good as we can? How can we push ourselves to be as good as we can? And so I think part of it is just these are people I'd love to work with, and so I've invited them to come along. That's part of the why and the vision of high quality live magic. In terms of the how do you get these people? How do you have how do you get these people? How do you have that conversation? It's been it's a lot more simple than you might think. It's a conversation that goes along the lines of, this is the vision of what I'm trying to do. I've seen your work. I love what you do. Our vision is to champion and celebrate magic. We want to give the public chance to see really great quality magic. We want to look after our audiences. We want to collaborate and work together to help each other to be as good as we can and create really good magic. That's the vision of what we're trying to do. I understand this might not be the right fit for you, as it's quite a small show, but if you still are on board, if you think that's something you'd like to be part of, we'd love to work with you. That's kind of a summary of how the conversation goes. And there's a PDF document that goes with it, and there's a phone call and whatnot. But I've been amazed by the generosity of so many people within the community, the people like Andy Gladwin, the people like Tom Stone, who have given their time and their encouragement, and they've come and they've joined the show because they've gone, oh yeah, I can see the benefit in that, and it sounds like a great thing to be part of, and it's a lot of fun, to be honest.
Mm.
Um, and then it just comes by word of mouth, much like gigs come by word of mouth. Performers have, we try and look after our performers, and they say, oh, this is a really fun gig. They recommend it to other people. And then it becomes a game of stepping stones. When you've got a roster that is all of those names that you previously mentioned, then other people say, oh, I want to come and do that. And I get cold emails from magicians from all over the world saying, hey, can I come and perform at the show? And through meeting people at things like the Session Convention and Blackpool, I get introduced to people, and I'm cheeky. I just say, "Hey, love to work with you. What do you think?" So
That's great.
I can't announce any names just yet. I'm looking at my secret, super sneaky secret whiteboard. I've got some very exciting names to announce for next year, but that'll come at a later date.
That's exciting. Here's a question on that. You do have some incredible names. Obviously, at the moment, you're based in Nottingham,
Hmm.
so and you're looking to expand outside of that.
Mm.
Have you ever considered like streaming the shows over Zoom as well, and selling tickets to people that maybe live in an area where it's almost impossible to come up for a night to watch a show to Nottingham? Or
Yeah,
is that something, are you trying to maintain that live performance sort of?
I think my gut instinct with that is I very much want to convince people to get away from screens and come and enjoy live entertainment. There is something very different and very real about that tangible experience of magic that is unique to magic, I think, or maybe live theatre as well. There is something about that shared experience of being in a room with lots of people who are all laughing their heads off, or all just going, "What on earth just happened?" that you can't get from being on a screen. And I think there's health benefits to that. I think we do ourselves a world of good by being out with other people, and I think that's very much something I'm committed to. Come along to see live magic. Come and join us. Come and have a night out.
Great, really good. Um, I said I was going to ask you two questions about it. There's one other question. Recently, I don't know how recently, but recently you've been putting workshops on for
Mm.
magicians. So you just came back. You just had on Alex McAleer, who had
Mhm.
a kind of a big workshop all about stagecraft. I know
Mm,
Matt from my office went over and raved about it
mm,
on the following day, and I had serious envy that I didn't go. But I know that from talking to you, you're planning more of these.
mm,
So, two questions on that. What you've mentioned several times during this interview about giving back to the community
mhm.
and promoting the art of magic, which is fantastic. Is what made you decide to go down the route of putting workshops on under the Curious Cabaret brand? Because that's very, very different to putting on a show. And
Mm.
on that subject, like the your customer base, the people who come and watch the shows, is there like a split? Is it like 100% lay people, or are there magicians that come along as well?
Mm,
Because magicians are a big part of watching magic. Who wouldn't want to see
mm.
buy a ticket to a magic show, not a magician? So I suppose two questions. One, what's the split of magicians and lay people? And two, what made you decide to put something on that is specifically just for magicians and not really for lay people?
Yeah, so in terms of the split of our audience, the vast majority of it is a public audience. We have a number of people who are not magicians but have an interest in magic, and we do have some magicians coming. I'd probably say the split is a 80-20 on a good night. Often it's closer to probably 90% lay people. And that's very much the case. Like I really want the public to to see how amazing this world is that we live in, because I think magic's incredible, and I think you're missing out if you've not seen live magic. And if you go and you ask people, I don't know how you find when you're doing gigs, and ask, have you ever seen live magic before? It's quite astounding how many people have not, and you will be the first person that has shown them live magic. So that's kind of very much where that sits. In terms of the decision to put out workshops under the brand of the Curious Cabaret, I don't know. That might not be from a marketing point of view, from a brand identity point of view. I don't know if that's the right decision or not. But I think the Curious Cabaret is probably better known than me as an individual, and but within the magic community. And so that's partly why I used it as a banner for it. But it does still tie in with the kind of vision and values of the show itself. And I don't think it's probably that bad a thing to communicate to a public audience that we are serious about creating great performance and helping people to be as good as they can. So the vision behind the workshops is to focus on stagecraft specifically. We mentioned how lots of people come into magic from a close-up background. They learn close-up because you can do that from books and from watching downloads and things like that. But I personally think there's a bit of a gap in our current generation of performers who haven't been able to have the opportunity to learn some of those theatrical skills. They haven't had time on stage necessarily, and often it can show. And so I want to be able to support and help people in learning some of those things. So how do you learn how to, for example, walk onto a stage or speak to a larger audience when you're used to performing down here? It can be as simple as going from performing here to performing here, so that you frame your face, all kinds of little things like that. And so the stagecraft workshops all are going to have different areas of focus on specific skills for stage performance, but that can be utilized for close up as well. What's in fact, just as a side note, what's really useful is if you ever do close up and you're doing like a massive table, if it's like at a wedding or a banquet, something like that, where you've got 15, 20 people on a table, having the skill to be able to turn that into a parlor show is great. Anyway, side note. So yeah, the workshops are designed to support magicians, and they're heavily subsidized. So I want to give people the best access to the best teachers that we can find. This month, coming up in just under 2 weeks in July, one of the names on the bill for the cabaret is Fernando Figueres, who is probably a lesser known person within the magic community, unless you are part of the Spanish School of Magic, in which case you'll know that Fernando heads up Campus Magico. He's one of the sort of leading thinkers and one of the leading people who's helping and coaching magicians to be great at what they do. He's a mentalist, but he's going to be coming and doing a full evening's lecture, thinking us about making deeper, more meaningful, and more engaging magic. So it's going to be like a holistic approach at how do we ask great questions? How to engage our audience? How do we incorporate psychology into our magic to make it as good as possible? I think it's going to be quite a hard session. I think there's going to be a lot of soul searching and a lot of reflecting on what we do and think, oh, that could have been better, but in a good way, in a good way. So if you're interested in coming on to that, it's 1st of July, and you can find the links in our Cabaret social media stuff.
That's amazing. Well, I'm going to get all the links off you to put in the description down below in a second.
Thank you.
But before I do, and before we wrap this up, I want to ask you one more question. I kind of said before, what's your end game with the Curious
Mm,
Cabaret? What's what are you wanting to achieve on your magical bucket list? And what I mean by that is you went professional not too long before the pandemic
mm,
and have built a great reputation for yourself as a performer individually, but also as the Curious Cabaret. It's gone from strength to strength, and that's with a dip over a couple of years of the
mm,
the pandemic that we've referenced. Are there any goals and aspirations that you want to achieve? Like I know you talked a little bit about the Curious Cabaret. You've mentioned potential competition acts in the future. Like, is there
mm,
something you want to achieve? Is there something that you would like to do? Are you wanting to lecture yourself? You've got a lot of knowledge, you've got a lot of experience, and you're
mm.
helping magicians right now. Is a lecture that you put on yourself something you want to do? Are you wanting to put work with a company in terms of putting information on about stagecraft? Like, what goals do you have that you're wanting to achieve over the you know rest of your career?
So I think with that idea, with that kind of idea of a venue in the back of the head, I think that's kind of a shell essentially that encompasses a lot of things that I want to see happen. But I think my heart, my passion is for growing, creating brilliant shows for individuals. So I'd love to be able to expand work on production, producing other people's shows, directing other people's shows. Um, there's a really silly ambitious. I'm quite an ambitious person, as you may have picked up on, but one of the things that I'd love to do at some point in the future, in the next few years perhaps, is to do something that I saw happen in Germany, which was inspiring, which is during their convention, they have a festival of magic that runs alongside the convention. And it's kind of like a sort of a city or a town-wide takeover where it's very much outwards facing. So as well as their convention, they have shows for the public and they have buskers everywhere doing magic. I would love to do some kind of festival of magic in the UK
Mm.
where we take over a city and we, like a comedy festival, where we have venues, partner venues all over the city, and we have performers that fit with those venues doing their own parlor shows or stage shows or close-up shows, or we've got buskers. And so bringing performers in from all over the place to just create that whole community. But I think I'd love to be working, directing other people's shows, producing shows, and having theatres and spaces where we can make those things happen, where we can create things that people have not seen before. That would be, I think that would be where I want to get to.
And you've said many times that you're very passionate about directing and you're very
Mm.
passionate about producing shows. We talked off camera before we started this interview about Morgan and West, and we're both gutted that they no
Yeah,
longer. Uh,
got my
love the
got
mug.
my Morgan and West mug here.
No,
In sad times.
it is sad times. But I mean, they're both very happy, and obviously, we talked about Reese Morgan now really
Mm,
being involved in production and direction and managing other people's tours and so on and so forth.
mm.
And he's effectively not really performing anymore, despite being an incredible performer.
Yeah.
Is that something that you could see yourself transitioning into at some point down the line? Or transitioning away from performing, or are you always going to have that kind of, you're always going to need that fix, like where
Yeah, that's a really good question. Perhaps one I can't answer specifically at the moment. I think yes, in some sense, I possibly could see myself doing a lot more of that. I get a lot of enjoyment out of just creating things and seeing things come up from the ground and making things. I think you probably will struggle to get the performer out of me. I will always be someone who hosts or kind of fronts things. I think that's kind of something that we'll do as well, but perhaps in a different way, perhaps on a smaller scale. I think you'll never get the teacher out of me. That's why there's all the workshops and lectures and things like that, because of my heart for teaching and educating. So there'll be aspects of all of those things, I think, whatever that looks like in the future.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And final question, because I know that for anybody watching this interview, if I don't ask this question, I'm probably going to get kicked. If somebody's an up and coming stage magician
Yeah.
and that they want an opportunity to perform on the Curious
Mhm.
Cabaret, I know the reason I found out about it is because Matt, who'd been doing magic, even though he's very experienced when it comes to performing on stage, he's very new when it comes to actual performance of magic. That Matt was performing on the Curious Cabaret, and
Yeah.
that's how I found out about you guys. Like, if somebody wants experience performing on stage and wants your advice and help and support,
Mhm.
and are really passionate about growing as a performer, what steps would they have to go through to get on your radar, so to speak?
Yeah. So the easiest thing to do is just send me a message. So you can directly message me at the Curious Cabaret on Instagram or Facebook, or you can contact me directly if you're on Facebook, which is Chris Wilder. So I'm just going to turn my phone off quickly because it keeps pinging at me. Um, yeah, so you can send me a direct message, which is, I guess, the beginning of a conversation. With the Curious Cabaret, we didn't really talk about the structure of it, but if you don't know, we have it in 3 acts. At the beginning of the show, we always have a 5 to 8 minute spot for newcomers, and then we have 2 main acts or 3 main acts later on in the show, and that spot is reserved for people. And at 5 minutes, for some people, might seem like a very short time. We could even go as short as 3 minutes, but 5 to 8 minutes is intentional because if you can get a really solid 5 minute act and you can do 5 minutes confidently and in a way that's really polished, okay, then you can do 10 and then you can do 12, much like they do in comedy circuits. Um, and so, yeah, it becomes a conversation. What we're really looking for and really looking to inspire are performers who want to create original magic and original scripts that will stand them out from other people. I think I think we really want to help people be as good as they can. And I think one of the ways of doing that is helping people to create an original character for themselves. I'm not suggesting you have to be, in a fancy costume or kind of being really crazy, but you need to on stage be yourself, and you need to be, or at least a version of yourself that feels true and is not like any other magician. Because the last thing we want to happen, and we'll have all had this experience if you want to be a professional magician, is someone rings up and say, hey, I'm looking for a magician. It doesn't matter which magician. Actually, we want people to say, hey, I really want to see Craig Petty, or I really want to book Chris Wilder, because they know who you are as a performer, whether that's on stage or whether that's on close up. So it's part of a conversation. We want to help you. And if you're not there yet, if kind of we have the conversation, okay, and think, okay, you're not quite ready to do stage time, then I'm very happy to help. I'm very happy to advise and give time and say, look, why don't you work on this, or why don't you work on this? And we can get to the point where, okay, then you can come and have some stage time. But get in touch with me. We'll have a conversation. And as I say, I'm happy to help. And we'll go from there.
That's perfect. That's great. Really, really, really awesome interview. Chris, I was speaking to Noel Coulter. I don't know how well you know Noel.
Yeah, no, no.
And we were just having a chat, and he turned around to me and he said, "You know what? My goal in magic is I want to leave magic in a better position than it was in when I found it in the first place."
Yeah.
And that kind of really hit me. And I think that having spoken to you, that's something that you're trying to do as well, and not just trying to do,
Mm,
but you're managing, and
thank
what
you.
you're doing is very unique and very different, and you are giving a lot of people opportunities, and not only giving a lot of magicians opportunities, but there's a lot of people that are general public, that maybe have passing interest in magic, but I think that they appreciate it more now than they did before, and that's
Mm,
because of coming to your shows and seeing how you present the Curious Cabaret. And it's phenomenal to see. And on behalf of the entire community that's watching this, I want to say thank you, and please continue to do the whole. Please continue because
Thank you,
what
Greg. I really appreciate that.
is amazing. It really is, and I will continue to support the Curious Cabaret. And I honestly, this has been one of my favorite interviews that I've ever conducted. So I know you're busy. God, we've only heard for the last hour about how busy you are. I know how busy you are. So thank you so much for finding time to come on the channel. Thank you
You're
so much.
very welcome, Craig. Lovely to chat to you.
You too. So, if people want to check you out and they want to buy tickets, they want to come up to Nottingham, they want to go to the Curious Cabaret, can we talk about socials and websites and so on and so forth?
Yeah,
And
absolutely. So the easiest thing to do is find us on Instagram or Facebook. It's at The Curious Cabaret, all one word. Or you can get in touch with me directly at Chris Wilder Magic, and you'll find all the details in the usual links on there. Or you can see my website, which is chriswilder.co.uk, where there's upcoming events as well.
when you see the upcoming events, do you see the names of the people on the bill as well for the upcoming
Yeah.
event?
Yeah, we've got all of our acts booked for the rest of 2024 now. I haven't quite finished populating all of the dates, but our lineup is ready for the end until December.
Amazing. And will the workshops be on there as well? So if
Yeah.
there's that,
So on our Instagram, so if you're using Instagram, which is the easiest place, it'll take you to a link tree which has all of the dates for shows, all the dates for workshops. The workshops are always the Monday just before the first show, so it's normally the first Monday of the month. This year we are just doing lectures, so they're Monday evenings. You can come from 5 o'clock, come and have drinks and food and kind of socialize with magicians. The lecture will start at 7, and there'll be plenty of time to explore those ideas. For next year, we will be bringing back workshops, so full day workshops as well as evening lectures. So if you've got the time and you really want to dig into some of these topics in a lot of detail, then come and spend the whole day with us working with people like Tom Stone and Nicola Arcane and so forth.
fantastic, phenomenal, absolutely unbelievable. Um, Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I want everybody who's watching this video to do two things for me. First of all, leave a comment down below. I'm sure Chris will see those comments. Second of all, share this video. Let more people know about the Curious Cabaret. But most importantly, go follow the Curious Cabaret on all of the socials and book a ticket. You can get very cheap hotel accommodation in Nottingham, even if you live on the other side of the UK. Catch a train. The trains to Nottingham are fantastic. Go and put yourself up for the night. Go and watch the Curious Cabaret. It's something that really, as a community, we should support, and I will continue to support as well. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the
Great.
channel.
No worries.
Problem. Guys, on behalf of Chris Wilder and the Curious Cabaret, thanks very much for joining me here on Magic TV. Don't forget, I'll be back next Saturday with another interview and tomorrow with a bunch of other content as well. But on behalf of Chris Wilder, thanks very much. My name's Craig Petty, and this is Magic TV.